Okay, so let's go ahead and finish. I don't want to be done. I want to get all the way through this tonight. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father. Canaan. Boo. Boo, Canaan, boo. The reason why we're supposed to boo Canaan is because we're going to kill all of his descendants. Okay? Canaan's a bad guy. Boo, boo, Canaan. Boo. The reason why is, of course, we have to justify in our minds killing all of his descendants because they're the ones who are living in that land that we're supposed to have. And we're supposed to go in there and make war against them and kill every single one of them and take their towns, take their houses over, take their vineyards, take their fields. So boo! Boo, Canaan! Boo! These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. So we have another man of the soil, by the way. Cain was a man of the soil, too. Something about Noah, apparently, going back to Lamech from before the flood, was supposed to result in rest from the toil of the labor caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. I honestly don't know exactly how that plays out. At any rate, maybe Noah gave them wine. Maybe that's how he comforted them. He invented wine. I don't know. He figured out how to make wine out of grapes. I don't know. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, boo, boo, Canaan, boo. Remember, and I'm doing this for a reason. When we read this, when we read it, when I read it, when you hear it, when you hear it, we need to put ourselves in the mindset of one of those ancient Israelite men who are hearing this for the first time. Okay? The Canaanites are the ones they're going to go make war against. They're the ones who are living in the towns that they're supposed to go and occupy. They're supposed to go into that land and fight and kill all those Canaanites. All right? I said way back when I started this that when we read through the Genesis, we need to make note of every time we get that subtle reminder of who the original audience for this book is. This is one of those things. Okay? I'm not saying that whenever Moses read Ham, the father of Canaan, that he was encouraging the crowd to go boo, 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 or whatever their equivalent would have been. But I'm doing that intentionally to remind us, remember that he is reminding them that Canaan is the land that we're going to go into. Those people are the ones who are living in those city-states that we've been called to occupy, to dwell in, and conquer through force and bloodshed. Okay? So Canaan is the one who's cursed, because Canaan is the one of the Israelites they're going to have to fight and kill and subjugate and subdue in order to move into their land. And these are the same people who are going to be going to do that. And Moses is reading this out loud to the people who are going to be going in and doing that imminently. So Ham, the father of Canaan, boo, boo, Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backwards and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father's nakedness. Now, the way this is written indicates to me that Ham intentionally looked upon his father's nakedness. I don't think Ham can necessarily be blamed if he didn't know that Noah was in the tent. He went in there, accidentally saw his father's nakedness, and spooked and startled and ran out. I don't think he would have been blamed for that. Either he followed him in there, either he saw him stagger in there and followed him, or he went in there unknowingly, saw Noah, but instead of being ashamed and looking away and covering Noah up, he didn't. He laughed at him, mocked him, enjoyed the view, whatever it was. Something about Ham's conduct was inappropriate. It doesn't say what. It doesn't clarify what it was. But something about Ham's conduct was inappropriate. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, these are the first words of Noah, by the way. Noah is finally going to speak. Cursed be Canaan. Boo! Boo, Canaan. Boo! The lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. This is justification for the Israelites stomping out the Canaanites. He also said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. Yay, yay, Shem, yay. He's going to be the ancestor of the Hebrews, the Israelites. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. Boo, boo, Shem. No. May Canaan, May Canaan, boo, boo, Canaan, be the slave of Shem. Yay, yay, Shem. May God extend the territory of Japheth. We're kind of neutral. Whatever. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem. Yay, yay, Shem. And may Canaan, boo, boo, Canaan, be his slave. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Altogether, Noah lived 950 years. And then he died. Always do. That's how the account always ends. And then he died. And then he died. And then he died. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons. I was raised German, so we pronounce that word Japheth. I was raised German Lutheran, I should say. So we pronounce that word Japheth with a yeh sound. Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer: Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan: Elisha, Tarshish, the Kittim, and the Rodanim. From these, the maritime peoples spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. The sons of Ham. Now, the sons of Japheth. Well, let's go ahead and go through all this. The sons of Ham: Cush, that's basically Ethiopia; Mizraim, that's Egypt; Put, that's Libya; and Canaan. Boo, boo, Canaan, boo. The sons of Cush: Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka. The sons of Ramah: Sheba and Dedan. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod, as far as I know, I'm not actually seeing a reference to it down here in these footnotes. There's a lot of footnotes in this one, by the way. Basically means rebel. That's not necessarily a name, as much as it is he was a rebel. I believe he's Gilgamesh. I believe Nimrod and Gilgamesh are the same guy. It's actually a fascinating study. You should look it up. Go into Google and type on Nimrod Gilgamesh. It's actually very interesting. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, and Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Resen, which is between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Nimrod was not a good guy. When it talks about, because the name itself means rebel, and it talks about him being a mighty warrior or a mighty hunter before the Lord, that's not a praise of him. He was an opposition of or defiant of the Lord. He was a mighty hunter in front of the face of the Lord. He may have been the first hunter. He may have been the first hunter of wild game. I mean, we just got the permission to do that before, after the flood, a couple generations before. So he may have been the first one to popularize the hunt of wild game, but he also may have hunted men. There are other stories about him in various other Jewish sources and things like that. Again, I also believe he's a Gilgamesh. So if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, I believe he and Nimrod are the same guy, talking about the same thing. But he was not a good guy. And we know that because, if the text itself hadn't made it clear already, the centers of his power were Babylon and Assyria. And as we go through the Old Testament, we find out that those are the greatest enemies of Israel in the Old Testament. They had lots of enemies, but no greater enemies than Babylon and Assyria. They're number 1 and 2 on the most wanted list. They're the top of the line of the rogues gallery of Israel's Old Testament enemies, and they ultimately trace their ancestry and history back to Nimrod or Gilgamesh, as I believe. Mizraim, Egypt, was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Leabites, Naphtuhites, Pathrusites, Chalzuhites, from whom the Philistines came. Those are also bad guys. And Caphtorites. Canaan, boo, boo, Canaan, boo, was the father of Sidon, his firstborn. Now, just pretend we have a hissing sound in the background as the crowd hisses at all of these names. And or gnashes their teeth, or shakes dust, or whatever it is they do in that culture. And of the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Oh, ites. Later, the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon towards Gerar as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. Boo, boo, these are all bad guys. Boo. These are the sons of Ham by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. Sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Japheth, or maybe the older brother of Japheth. That's a little unclear. Just because their names are listed in the order of Shem, Ham, and Japheth doesn't mean that's their birth order. Okay. We know that Ham was the youngest. We saw that back in Genesis 9, verse 24, his youngest son. But he's listed second in all the listings. So he's not. So the Shem, Ham, and Japheth ordering is not in terms of their birth order. It's in terms of their importance. Basically, well, yeah, this is a good place to say this. Basically, the Shemites are the good guys, the Hamites are the bad guys, and the Japhethites are just kind of there. They're just kind of out there. Not really neutral, because they can be good guys or bad guys, kind of depending on the circumstances. But basically, the Shemites and the Hamites, the Shemites are the good guys, the Hamites are the bad guys, and the Japhethites we don't really care a whole heck of a lot about, except for every so often when they wander into the story. Usually are enemies, because most people usually are enemies of God. That's kind of how we all start. That's where we all default to. Now it's extreme. This isn't it. Someone out there, some people have done what they can to trace all of these tribes. I talk about the book of Josephus, the works of Josephus, who is a very valuable source of history in a lot of ways. And he's one of his biggest work actually is basically a commentary on the entire Old Testament. And so he pretty much covers all this stuff and provides extra information on it. Who knows how valid some of his information is. But even in the days of Josephus and before, they were trying to trace where all these people went, where they went, where the tribes came from. And I don't know how many of these different names we can track to different tribes that came and went over the years. To some degree, we can do this. The Bible itself will track a number of these families. So, we can do this to some degree. Some of these are just total mysteries. And it doesn't necessarily explain the origins of everybody on Earth, because we don't really know how you get the Eastern Asians or the Oriental, the Far East Oriental people, the Eastern Asians. Of course, then you have the big mystery of the how people got across the seas in the North and South America and down into the Pacific Islands and Australia and all that. So it's not a complete list in the sense that we can track the origin of every tribe on Earth through this. And some of these names we don't know really what became of them. But it's an interesting thing to look at. I'm not going to get into that here by any means. But it's an interesting thing to look at. Basically, to make it somewhat simple to understand, you had the Hamites more or less became the Africans. Mizraim himself is Egypt. Okay, that name Mizraim and Egypt are the same thing. Mizraim was probably the first pharaoh of Egypt, probably Menes, as we know from his. I don't know if that. You get so far back in time, okay, and this is 2 generations after the flood, or actually only 1 generation after the flood, and you have the Tower of Babel, which is going to come up here in a minute. We call him Menes. The first pharaoh of Egypt today is often referred to as Menes. I believe it's Mizraim. I believe it's the same guy. You go far enough back in the languages, because Egypt was conquered by Persia and then conquered by Greece, and then all the names were, Hellenized into Greek names and just all that. So it's like, I don't know how far back you have to go before you get to a proper pronunciation of it. In the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, it's in our Bibles today, our Old Testaments today, you see Mizraim, and it's basically Egypt. The Egyptians themselves, of course, never called themselves Egypt. They had their own word for themselves. I believe Mizraim was the first pharaoh of Egypt, Menes, or whatever you want to call him. And we have Cush, Put, and Canaan. Well, Cush and Put were, I believe, Ethiopia and Libya, and then these other people. So more or less, the Hamites became the Africans. Apparently, after the Tower of Babel, they just wandered down into Africa, apparently. Now, some people in the past would use this as a way to justify, for example, race-based slavery in the 1800s, or race-based discrimination in the centuries after that, 1700s, or race-based discrimination in the centuries after that, because the idea was that, well, Canaan was cursed. Ham was cursed. They're supposed to be the slave race. God even says that. Look at what Noah says here. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be a slave. So we're obligated to enslave these Africans, to enslave these black people who come from Ham. That actually was used. And I don't know how widespread that is today. I don't know. I've not ever heard that presented in any church that I've ever gone to. I live in Southern Illinois. I have two primary churches that I regularly attend. I've never heard anything like that in either one of those. I have gone to several others on short-term bases over the years. I've never heard anything even remotely like that. I know that teaching has existed. I know that it has been used as a justification for the enslavement of black people or the discrimination of black people in our past. And maybe it still is. Maybe if I went down to Tennessee or Mississippi, Alabama, maybe you would still find it in places like that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Okay, I have not been there. I don't. Oh, actually, I've never been there. I've traveled through some of those states a few different times, but I'm not much of a traveler. So I don't know how widespread that teaching is. Hopefully not. Okay, hopefully it is not. It is obviously completely false and wrong. Never was accurate, never was based in anything even remotely resembling accuracy. Always was an agenda that people had to justify slavery as they were practicing it back in those days, and discrimination afterwards. But that is something that has happened in our past. That is something that has occurred. Because, generally speaking, you look at this list of Hamites, and these more or less are Africans. These tribes all ended up more or less ended up in Africa, and so the Hamites are basically the black-skinned people, are basically the Africans. The Japhethites are basically anything that's not a Hamite or a Shemite. The Shemites are the people who more or less stayed in the area that we call the Middle East. Okay, we're going to get to those in a minute, but they're basically the ones who are all centered in that area of the Middle East. Of course, it includes the Israelites. It includes all the Hebrews, all the people who speak the Hebrew language, and basically, we would call them the Middle Easterners, more or less. The Japhethites are pretty much everything else. Europeans would come from the Japhethites. Russians would come from the Japhethites. Presumably, the Far Easterners, Chinese and Japanese, would also come from and the North and South Americans would have migrated from over there, presumably. But they're just kind of like anything that's not a Hamite or a Shemite. And they're not too terribly important to the story. They're just kind of there. The sons of Shem: Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, I like that name, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram: Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshech. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. That's where the word Hebrew comes from. The two sons, presumably the Eber is the guy who got the Hebrew language at the Tower of Babel. Two sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg. because in his time the earth was divided, presumably a reference to the Tower of Babel incident. His brother was named Joktan. Joktan was the father of Almodad, Sheleph, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha toward Sephar in the eastern hill country. These are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. You go away from me, cat. No. This is my big fat cat here. I'm not going to let you touch that thing, cat. I'm not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, cat. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. No, no, no. You get up in here. You get up in here. She's okay. Now, let's go ahead and start a new one.